Chapter 1. The End of the World. There's no such thing as doomsday, only the end of one era and the beginning of another. I sat staring at the false face on the wall. I could hear Mad Bear wrestle around in his kitchen putting together yet another snack. And I could hear that coffee pot perking. "We'll have something ready here in a minute," he called out from the other room. "I can throw a meal together in no time, and delicious too." Falseface was only one of the many strange objects and ancient relics that Mad Bear had collected or acquired. There were medicine objects and other ceremonial paraphernalia related to his calling. There were trade beads and old medals from the days of the first settlers, and there were sacred artifacts that had been given to him on his journeys to other lands. Along one wall stood a glass display case filled with traditional jewelry and ornaments from many tribes, and on the top shelf in this case was a small sign that read "Museum." Hanging on the wall in the entranceway, there was another small sign with the words "Mad Bear's Trading Post," and I wondered whether that sign ever hung outside for passerby to see. Because it was too small to attract attention, one would really have to be looking for it to see it. Mad Bear did have some items for sale if anyone was interested. Authentic traditional jewelry that was very expensive. The jewelry was turquoise and silver mostly, but some of the items were made of bone or some had teeth or claws. There was also oil paintings, carvings, old coins, and other items that had enchanting histories. Mad Bear's home was not a very public place, however, and much of the time he remained here in total seclusion. The little house on Mount Hope Road on the Tuscarora Native Reservation near Niagara Falls, New York, had been built to Mad Bear's specifications. It was made of cinder block and had high windows with one-way glass so that no one could see inside. The windows were protected with iron grating. His bright red Toyota Land Cruiser usually stood on the gravel drive in front of the house, but when he wanted to be alone, he simply parked it into the garage and people assumed he was away. It was a known fact among his acquaintances and neighbors that Mad Bear simply disappeared for days or weeks at a time. There were times when he locked up in his house, times when he was on the road, and times, some said, when he was nowhere at all. The first time I saw Mad Bear, when I was with Rolling Thunder in the Berkeley Hills in California in 1972, I thought he looked like a comic strip character I remembered from my childhood. With his Hawaiian print shirt, his big round belly, wide smiling face, and that Tiparillo cigar clamped in his teeth, he looked like Smilin' Jack in the flesh. But once I got to know him, I thought he looked like a bear. It was much more than a simple name association. He seemed to walk like a bear. He seemed he had the face and the hands and the manner of a bear. There were those who knew him, I discovered, who found it possible during his mysterious disappearances to imagine that he might be wandering in the woods and fields in the actual form of a bear. "Come on in here and try some of these sandwiches I put together," Mad Bear called to me. I sat down in my folding chair at the little metal table in the kitchen. This table, like everything else in the house, was covered with books, magazines, papers, herbs, and trinkets. But these were easily pushed aside or stacked up against the wall to make room for the plates. "I tried a new idea with these things," he said. "I think you're gonna have to admit they're pretty doggone delicious." "What's your new idea?" I asked. "All these ingredients in here, the tomato slices, cheese, and everything, I soaked it all in pickle juice. And then I even sprinkled just a few drops on the bread. Here, let's pour this coffee while it's piping hot." He yanked the plug from the wall. "This little pot's not automatic, you know. And then I put these sandwiches in that little grill thing, heated them up just enough so they wouldn't be damp with the pickle juice. It's not just the liquid from the jar either. I actually squeezed a little bit out from the pickles." From where I sat, I could see into the garage where I slept, and I looked at my bed in the middle of the cement floor. This bed, when it was down, used up Mad Bear's garage space, making it necessary for him to park his Land Cruiser out in the yard. But he, or some helpful neighbor no doubt, had rigged this bed with pulleys so that, by drawing the ropes on both ends, it could be hoisted clear up to the casters that were screwed into the ceiling, making space for the car to come in underneath. It was a clever idea, one Mad Bear had claimed to his own credit, and one of the first things he had shown me when I arrived. "Dig in," Mad Bear said, snapping his fingers. These things were made for eating, and he took a big chomp out of one of the sandwiches. "Delicious," he exclaimed through his mouthful of food. "What did I tell you?" "They are delicious," I admitted, as soon as I had chewed enough to comment. "Not only that," Mad Bear chuckled, "but they taste good too." Mad Bear took great delight in food, preparing it, eating it, discussing it. Too much delight, I suppose, for he was constantly overeating and was very overweight. "It just makes you wonder," Mad Bear went on, speaking and chewing at the same time. "How come nobody's ever thought of this idea before? But then somebody could have, and we would not even know it. I never found this in any restaurant, though. We could get some kind of exclusive sandwich line going. Our own secret recipe. People would be pretty taken by it. No pickles on here, and yet it's got this flavor. Kind of a subtle thing, you know? Well, we got too much to think about. We can't bother about that kind of stuff." It occurred to me that Mad Bear had no mealtime rites that he performed before eating. Nothing. At any rate, that I had ever seen. He simply said, "Dig in." There was no saying or prayers or grace, no offering made, no moment of silence, no singing or chanting such as I had experienced with so many monks and swamis. There was, nonetheless, something very warm and meaningful in the way he said, "Dig in." "Well, you're right," Mad Bear said. I looked up at him. He was smiling. He paused, as though waiting for me to make some gesture of surprise. I simply smiled back and asked, "Why not?" "I have nothing against it, nothing whatsoever, but I'm praying all the time, if you want to call it that. All our traditional people are always praying. For others, it may be good to pray every time they eat, because that's when they manage to get around to it. We look at it like this. There's only two reasons to pray about our food. One is to ask, and the other is to give thanks. We always give thanks. We never ask. Now, the Christians, some of them, they see it different. They say, 'Give us this day our daily bread,' and we don't believe in that. But I have nothing at all against those people. Each have their own way. In our way, we consider we're the very hands and fingers of the Creator. All the living creatures are extensions of the Great Spirit. All the living creatures are hunting and gathering, and that's all part of the experience of the Great Spirit. That's our job. That's what we do for the Great Spirit. So I have no criticism about Christianity or any of these religions, at least in their original form. But there's this one thing where I think they've gotten way off track from their original teachings. Because we do not ask of the Great Spirit. The Great Spirit asks of us. Now, on the other hand, the thanks are always given. That's never left out. But the time to do that is as soon as we finish eating, or anything else. Whatever, we give thanks for everything. But you never see me push back my plate to get up from the table, here at home, or the restaurant, or anyone else's home, without saying, Niawa. That means thank you. That's our native word for giving thanks. And I say it all the time. Everything acknowledging everything else, even our struggles and our duties. We give thanks for that. That does make sense, I agreed. I appreciated his explanation, and I had not had to ask for that either. Niawa, I said, and I hoped I pronounced it satisfactory. Now this brings to my mind, we just might interrupt ourselves here for a minute and take care of a little important business. Well, you can just sit there. He got up and took some pinches of leaves from one of the baskets of dry herbs that were hanging over his old log-burning stove, and placed a dark metal pan over the fire. I put down my sandwich. With his back to me, Madbear bent over the fire and spoke in Tuscarora, and he sprinkled his offering into the pan. Soon there was smoke. It smelled beautiful. I closed my eyes and listened to the sing-song tones of the ancient language that Madbear used for only prayer and ritual. The sound was familiar to me now, from those several ceremonies I had observed that Madbear had conducted in the Berkeley Hills. That sound was familiar to me now, from those several ceremonies I had observed that Madbear had conducted in the Berkeley Hills. I just made a little offering, Madbear said, removing the pan from the fire and returning to his chair. I give thanks for your visit, for your being here, and for your interest. And I asked for a good, clear feeling in this house and for protection for you and me and our work that we're about to do. I should have already done that. I should have taken care of that yesterday, when you first got here. But we got right on our conversation and I kind of let it go. Maybe that's just as well. That way we kind of made our agreement on this level first. Well, now it's done. Later, I'll give you some smoke. Come in handy for you to use for yourself in certain situations. I might even show you some of what I prepared to put in there. I tried a sip of coffee, but it was still too hot and it burned my upper lip slightly. I picked up my sandwich and continued eating. There was a small pyramid of sandwiches on the plate between us. Now, what were we just talking about? Madbear scratched his head. Oh yeah, giving thanks. The prayers are always for giving thanks. Then, at times, there are things we can ask, just like I did, but not for ourselves. We ask when it's related to what we're supposed to be doing, that we may be guided in the right manner. He looked at me and grinned, and then glanced suddenly at the ceiling. His eyes moved along the ceiling toward the cupboard above the sink. Did you see that? Little spirits. You didn't see it? Right up there, just like little lights, dancing around. By golly, look at that. Maybe it's for you, for our prayers. I think you ought to see it. I wished I could. I stared at the ceiling. I blinked my eyes and stared again. I tried to convince myself that I could see some faint little sparkles, but I knew I could not. They just weren't there for me. I was tempted to pretend because I wanted to please Madbear, but I shook my head. Perhaps someday. By golly, these are delicious! Madbear exclaimed, extending once more to his ingenious sandwiches. Now, I picked up something else, right out of your thoughts. You want to tell you? When I picked up your thoughts before, you knew that, right? I said, dig in, and you started thinking about that. I just thought I'd mention it, in case you were wondering. Just now you were thinking about something cold to drink. You were thinking about that orange juice we left in the icebox this morning. But you don't want to ask. That's why I mention these things. That's why I pick up your thoughts. I think, because you don't ask much. Me, I'm a little more pushy. Well, you just help yourself. But get some of that Coke, though not that orange juice. That Coke will go one heck a lot better with this pickle juice. It's just a suggestion. Mad Bear and I stayed up late that evening. We sat at a card table in the front room, making notes. He had pens and papers so that we could make outlines for what he called the upcoming books. I could not think of what to outline. This was only my second day with Mad Bear, and what was ahead, I thought, was some travel, some sitting, and a great deal of listening on my part. I had thought I needed nothing more than to be available and attentive. "Well, we just have to make the bare bones outline," Mad Bear declared, "and then that'll put us right on the beam. See, we just plan our books, just the bare sketch. Then everything comes along our way to fill that up. It's like if you think it's going to rain, you put out a container. So you put that out first, and then along comes the rain." He jumped up again to unplug the coffee pot in the kitchen. "You gotta watch that thing, it'll get too strong." We'll just let her settle a bit, cool off. That little coffee pot was forever perking, it seemed, but it was a comforting and homey sound. Mad Bear returned to his notes. I watched him with amusement. He had brought from the kitchen a big, fat grease pencil, and he began to write. He wrote the words, "Earth Mother crying." It took up nearly a whole page. He looked up at me and grinned. "Well, this is for the title and the main headings, so it'll come out good and strong. See, this is the name of my book, Earth Mother Crying. Pretty good, huh?" Maybe you didn't know I was writing a book myself. People say Mother Earth all the time now, but here I've got Earth Mother. There's a difference. When you refer to the earth, you say Mother Earth. And when you refer to the mother, you say Earth Mother. That's the being herself, the spirit that's behind this earth. It's a female creation. It's a child of the Great Spirit too. We look at her as our mother. We sat in silence for a while. Mad Bear made several notes with his grease pencil and filled up several sheets of paper. I jotted down a couple of tentative subheadings for my recollections of Mad Bear's explanations, but I had fewer than a dozen words. "Well, you've got a different situation than me," Mad Bear said. "See, I'm writing about the past, so mine's already in my head. Just how to get it down. I'm starting out telling the vision I had years back in the sweat lodge. That's not traditional with the Haudenosaunee. So this story is my first sweat. I'm not writing it out, just making the outline. This outline business, this is all new to me because this is my first book. Hope I didn't waste any paper. You can't erase this marker. Take a look, see what you think." He handed me his several pages with their big, bold markings. I was not sure how to comment. I could not easily understand his lists of phrases because I was not aware of what thoughts were behind them. "Oh," he exclaimed, "we're forgetting something here. What are we forgetting?" I looked at his pages spread out before me. If he had forgotten something, I had no way of knowing. "The coffee," he said, "the coffee. Good thing I thought of it. Maybe it'll be still warm." "I'll get it," I said, starting up from my chair. Just then, there was a sharp, insistent rap on the window above our heads. I looked up. Several spontaneous images flashed through my mind. I pictured some kid reaching up with a stick, tapping on the window and scampering to hide. At the same time, I realized that it would be hard to reach a stick through the metal grating from below, and that the sound seemed to have been produced on the inside. I turned to look at Mad Bear. He was staring at me and grinning. He appeared to be pleased. "You heard that, right? You actually heard it. That's good, but you don't know what it was." "No. Messengers. Messengers for me. The same ones that we saw there in the kitchen. Well, you can't see them, but I guess you can hear them. Can you pick up any meaning?" "No, I just heard a tapping on the window. Tack, 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 like that." Well, that was a message for me. They're wanting to get in touch. And not the ones who tapped. They are just the go-betweens. Little elementals. They're physical in a way, so they're not so hard to see and hear once you get the hang of it. They have their own thing going, so we don't look for them. They mind their business and we mind ours. But then, when the elders send them, they come as messengers. They don't really understand our work and our objectives, but they don't have to. They're just useful for getting our attention. Madbear gathered his papers, arranged them in a stack, and walked into the kitchen. I'm gonna have to pass on this coffee here, but you come get some. It's all yours. I'll take a little dream medicine and hit the hay, so they can get to me. That's what the message is, just like you heard it. It's telling me to hit the hay. It's like, we're calling you right now, and you have a little meeting. So Doug, you go ahead and stay up, whatever you like. Good night. Within minutes, he was snoring loudly. I might have thought that such snoring meant that he had fallen fast asleep, that he had blown it by dozing off when something was trying to reach him. But I learned from Rolling Thunder and others that only the body sleeps. And when the body sleeps, conscious attention is not lost at all, but simply directed elsewhere. I realized there was no need for me to sit alone at the card table and ponder over an outline. I turned off the light in the front room and carried my coffee into the garage. I thought of the spider that Madbear had once told me about. The spider that had led the people through an underground passage from the old world to the new. I recalled our conversation of the day before, and I recalled the circumstances that led to my being there. When the book Rolling Thunder was completed, in 1973, I had set out for New York to rendezvous with Alice and Elmer Green and their team from the research department at the Menninger Foundation, and then departed with them for India. I had arrived early and taken a side trip to Niagara Falls in an attempt to contact Madbear. It was largely due to his subtle urging that I had left the Menninger Foundation months earlier in order to develop the Rolling Thunder story from a field report into a book. And I told him I was going to India, and that I should have liked to have met with him prior to this adventure, as I knew he had traveled much in India. But we'll talk when you get back, he had responded. But we'll have a lot to talk about when you get back. But when I returned from India, I had become preoccupied with my new manuscript about my travels and meetings in India. For months I could think of nothing else. During that period, Madbear had phoned me again and again. He told me about his new indoor toilet and his water heater, and about this bed that he had rigged up. I knew he was suggesting that I come, especially when at last he said, "You'll be comfortable here for as long as you'd like to stay." About the time that I finished the Swami book, Madbear's calls became insistent. "We have to get together," he would say. "We have to talk. There are things we can communicate about present and future events that might be important to share at this time. I think it might be our work to do this, something we're supposed to do. Maybe we can offer some ideas that might help people make it over the bridge from this world to the next, and make it in a balanced way. That's the main thing, in a balanced way. So when can you make it up here?" I had phoned Madbear from California only a few weeks before, suggesting that since I had last completed my manuscript, I was considering being in New York to deliver it in person. It might give us a chance to get together. We made arrangements for my arrival. I was to phone him when I was ready to head up his way from New York City, and then again when I reached Buffalo. "You could just get that bus out to LaGuardia and hop on a plane to Buffalo," he told me. "Meanwhile, I'll be waiting for you up here, knowing you're on our way. Then, when you land in Buffalo, you inquire about that bus that takes you up to Niagara Falls and what time it leaves. You give me a ring back, 'cause I'll be all set to head out for the rendezvous. Just tell the driver to let you out on the corner of 2nd and Fall Street, and I'll be right there, sitting in the car." When I arrived in New York City, I delivered my manuscript and met some friends. It was early evening when I phoned to let Mad Bear know I was on my way. There was no answer. I allowed the phone to ring. At last, I gave up. I ought not to board the airport bus, I decided, until I was sure he was home. It had been a few weeks since he had last spoken. In all the previous times I had been with him, he had always found a chance to mention how he liked to move as the wind blows. I could recall him saying, "You just can't pin me down." I knew I shouldn't start out for his place without talking to him first. I waited for a long time in the station, and I tried to telephone again and again. There was no problem postponing my arrival at Mad Bear's. Mad Bear could easily have been called away on some important matter. For all I knew, he could have simply gotten up and headed out, like a free spirit, like a gust of wind. Or for that, he might be walking about as a bear in the wilderness up north. Still, I felt that something was wrong, and it was for that reason that I tried him again and again, every few minutes, and let the phone ring. It was late at night when I left the station. I spent a couple of days with friends in Manhattan. Then I took the train to Connecticut to stay with some other friends. Every few minutes, day after day, I had dialed Mad Bear's number and had let the phone ring. When at last he answered, with a muffled, "Hello?" it surprised me. "Mad Bear," I shouted into the phone. "Doug," he shouted back. "Hey, you're lucky you got me. By golly, your timing's right on the button." Lucky, I thought to myself. Mad Bear, I've been trying to call you practically every minute for the past 4 days. Well, you couldn't have got me, 'cause I was in the hospital. I just now got out. I just this minute walked in the door to get some of my medicine and things, and Beeman and I are heading into the hills for a few days. We gotta do some pretty serious medicine on me. Pretty quick like, so I can't talk now. You coming up here? Well, I was going to, if it's still okay. Yeah, look, call me Tuesday. I'll be home on Tuesday and I'll be all straightened out. Just get on up to Buffalo and call me from there. I'll be ready and waiting. So, on Tuesday, I returned to New York City, flew up to Buffalo, phoned Mad Bear, and took the little bus up to Niagara Falls. Got on the second corner of 2nd and Fall Street, just as he had instructed me. There he was, sitting in his car on the corner, with a big smile on his face. It was turning autumn in Haudenosaunee country. This was all Haudenosaunee country. Everywhere I'd been during all these days, during my stay in New York City and in Connecticut, my flight up to Buffalo, and my bus ride to Niagara Falls. It was all Haudenosaunee country. I suppose that every acre of this entire land was now totally changed and much damaged by the progress of civilization. I was not part of that lineage or that heritage, and I did not belong to those who inherited the vast oral histories of this land. But I could recall the images from my coloring books and from the stories and poems my mother used to read to me. Here, long ago, must have lived the natives of those childhood conceptions. They were the natives who lived out of the doors, whose neighborhoods were big and wild and full of adventure, who were friends with the birds and the animals and even the wind and the moon. The natives in my childhood storybooks lived long before the made-up and misinterpreted natives of my school-day textbooks. Now you can't really see it, Mad Bear said, pointing out the window as we drove along. But that's the reservoir up there atop the hill, to this side of us. This hill we're driving alongside of here, this is all the reservation. The Tuscarora Reservation. What's left of it. That's my tribe, you know. I'm full-blood Tuscarora. My people migrated up from North Carolina, and we joined the Five Nations: the Onondaga, Oneida, Seneca, Mohawk, and Cayuga. And we became the last of the Six Nations, the so-called Little Brothers of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Of course, this is not our reservoir. This is just our land. This was all taken by the New York Water Authority. All's land here was at one time intended to be reservoir. They were going to flood all this area out here, and there wouldn't have been hardly any Tuscarora land left at all. Some people were prepared to give up their lives to try and stop it. They would have sat right here and let themselves be flooded and drowned if necessary. The reservoir turned out only half as big as planned. This is Tuscarora land, and these big companies and local governments haven't got a deed or a legal claim to it, but they just take it. Mad Bear had just been in the hospital, and he had to sign himself out his own recognizance. He explained against the doctor's protests. On the day I had reached him, he had been about to set out to accomplish his own medicine in his own way. He had a very serious heart attack. Unfortunately, he had seen it coming. So clearly did he see it before it reached him, he told me, that he could even be certain who had sent it. I got the sense, as he told his story, that some group who had been working in opposition to his cause of intertribal and intercultural dialogue had been performing some steady ritual to send him, in etheric form, some harmful potential. Apparently, there were individuals and groups in many realms who were opposed to unity and harmony. He did not identify the opponents, and I did not ask about them. I was out mowing the lawn, Mad Bear explained. I don't usually do it. I'm not supposed to be doing it, especially in the heat and with my weight and all. Though I don't have a bad heart, actually. The kid that usually comes around, I don't know what happened to him. I couldn't stand to let it go anymore. Well, I was kind of miffed, I guess, and against my better judgment, I wore myself out. I went on without rest or water, and I provided the perfect opportunity. As soon as I saw it coming, I just looked up, and I could actually see it coming. I knew I left myself wide open, and I knew it was going to be a heart attack. Though I had no symptoms at the moment, I tried to call Beeman and them and some of the medicine people, and it just happened they were all out. It was like everything was made to order for those particular ones' medicine to succeed against me. I got in the car and I tried to outrun it, and a motorcycle cop stopped me on the highway for speeding. He asked me if I had any idea how fast I was going. And I asked him if he realized I was about to die of a heart attack right here while he was writing up a ticket. So he actually escorted me to the hospital, and I got rushed into emergency room. Well, it hit me at that very moment, and it was a real doozy. So then came the heavy medications, and those things can fatigue and dull your energy systems. You can even lose contact with your spirit helpers that way. I knew, even as I was fading, that I had to bring up my will real strong and get free before I slipped too far and lost all my contacts. That afternoon, as I was about to arrive at Mad Bear's house for the first time, he let me in on the little people. I was not told the details of the medicine that he and Beeman Logan had performed in the mountains, but I was told that the little people had come to the ceremonial fireside and made their presence known by tugging on their pant legs. The little people, I learned, are a parallel evolution of human beings, whose physical forms reach less than 1 foot in height. The most highly developed of them come and go from this earthly realm and are seldom seen by our own people in contemporary times. Those without long cultural histories and records, in fact, know nothing of them. But they join the traditional Haudenosaunee and others frequently and regularly in ceremonies that are arranged for those special times. And they appear at other times as serves the purpose. Madbear's Street looked like a very typical street of a very rural area. There was an occasional small house on one side of the road and an occasional small house on the other. All the residents were natives. This was the rule of the reservation, I learned. It was the only way to protect what little the Tuscarora had that had not already been taken from them. It's like a little fortress, I thought to myself, as we pulled up into the driveway at Madbear's house. His was not a wooden house like all the others. It was built of concrete blocks, and the windows so high off the ground that no one could look in. They were covered with wrought iron grating. I live alone, as you know, he explained as we got out of the car, and it's a small place, but anyway, it's all my own, and it's done pretty well for me. It's good and secure, and no one ever knows whether I'm home or not. I like it that way, and sometimes I just lock it up and take off. This place is protected. I have medicine on this place that protects it. The house did look small, but sound and solid indeed. There was a screened-in front porch and a smaller inside porch, and then the front room, just big enough for a standard desk, a file cabinet, a couple of folding chairs, and a copy machine. You can bring your things right on through and set them down anywhere you'd like, Madbear said, leading the way. The crowded back room was a kitchen, dining room, den combination with a 4-burner gas stove, a stainless steel double sink, and a large wooden cupboard, a metal table with 3 kitchen chairs, 1 stuffed armchair, and a little black and white TV high on a shelf that was nailed to the wall right over the refrigerator. There was also a large metal cabinet, which I later learned stored a variety of Madbear's own medicines, and a wood-burning space heater over which hung a couple of baskets for drying herbs. Through this kitchen was a garage, and in the garage was a bed, on which I laid my luggage. The only other room was Madbear's bedroom, but with 3 multi-purpose rooms, plus a front porch and a garage equipped with a bed, toilet, and shower, the house seemed not so small after all. In only a moment, we were seated at the little metal table, and I was struck for the first time by the profound sense of urgency that lay behind Madbear's cheerful and buoyant manner. "So what's on your mind?" Madbear started. His opening was so direct and somehow surprising, and as I searched for the right answer, I felt his powerfully engaging energy. "Well, I was interested in our phone conversations," I offered after some hesitation, "and I thought we might..." "No, actually, what matters is what's on your mind." He responded instantly, but with a slow and thoughtful seriousness that I had never yet seen in him. "Everything in this physical dimension," he said softly, "is divided into 4s. This physical world is the lowest manifestation, and every aspect of it is measurable. In fact, it is created and defined and maintained by measurement. Dividing and adding and dividing. Every aspect of time and space seems to divide naturally into fours, as if it's all composed of four parts. Like, for example, the 4 quarters of an hour, the 4 quarters from moon to moon. Then there's the 4 seasons and the 4 directions. Then, the next step up the ladder, there's another different level, a little less solid than this so-called physical level, where everything is measurable in a way. But on that next step up from this physical dimension, everything seems to be in threes. The lowest levels come out of the ones above them, and it goes on. So the next highest level, the second level above this material world, how do you suppose things seem to break out? To break up into equal parts. See, it's getting closer and closer to the source of creation, where everything is self-contained. Do you think on that second level up, things come in 5s? Or maybe in 2s? It seems to me that above the level of 3s would be 2s, I suggested, leading more toward wholeness or oneness. Well, this is sort of the right idea, but the truth is, even the level of 3s has no exactness like we're used to. I mean, breaking down, separating. And beyond that, there's no parts, no measurements. Really, there's no time and space that can be measured in the way we think of it. But the history of our physical world can be divided into 4s. Something like 4 major periods. You mean like doomsday that various people have predicted from time to time? Yeah, but there's no such thing as doomsday. Only the end of one era and the beginning of another. And it's not just arbitrary, like dates on a calendar. From the human's point of view, it's going to be something really heavy. It's like a purification, a transition from one world to the next. Yet, it's no doomsday. People should understand it. People should know what's going on in terms of the larger picture. People should be invoked in it, in a conscious way, in a constructive way. This means waking up out of materialism and connecting up again with the spirit world. Learning to understand and cooperate with all the living forces of nature. In all the history of the world, we can find traditional people going back thousands of years without destroying or depleting or degrading the land. Living with nature and spoiling absolutely nothing for thousands of years. In all of history, wherever we find the people turning towards materialism and losing sight of their true source, they begin to destroy the world. Twice before, the human's world has been brought right up to the brink of death by so-called civilization, and then thrown into a great transition and renewal. This makes the 3rd time. Mad Bear had gone on for a long time, speaking about the elements and the forces of nature, speaking about spiritual dimensions and angelic beings, about nature sprites and elementals, and about the little people. He had explained to me his view that humans inevitably become destructive when, through their materialistic and technological preoccupations, they lose sight of their own source and begin to imagine that their physical forms and fashionings, they are complete in themselves. He had talked until it was time for our supper, though we had been sipping coffee and nibbling all the while. And then time for an early sleep. Then, in the morning, he told me the story of Falseface. I thought about the little people and tried to see them in my mind as I lay on that bed in Mad Bear's garage, watching the spider and listening to him snore. I even allowed my imagination to wonder who this little spider might be, persistently ascending and descending above me, its fine threads glistening in the lamplight, and whether, when I turned off the light, it would even still be there. I'd fallen asleep long after Madbear's snoring had begun, and I should have awakened long after he did. But he could not wait to talk to me, and he purposely banged and rattled our breakfast pans as loudly as he could in the kitchen and startled me out of a very sound sleep. He had been peering through the open door, it seemed, as he stood noisily at the stove, watching for my eyes to pop open. "Boy, did they talk to me last night," he said with a grin. "My people and your people, too. I mean, the minute I hit the hay, here they came, and I sure got an earful. I'll have to tell you about it. You better get up quick like and put on your appetite. I can rustle up one of the speediest breakfasts you've ever seen. I even used to be kind of famous for it at the time." The end of chapter 1. Niawa.